We all know that the Roman Empire was the master of infrastructure, building roads that spanned continents and lasted 1,000 years. But did you ever wonder what it actually felt like to walk those legendary roads? Forget modern pavement. Imagine being stalked by soldiers, crushed by military convoys, and risking fatal disease just to take a drink of water. In today's video, we'll talk about the brutal, physical reality of traveling the Roman roads with Apostle Paul, a journey of permanent, debilitating cost. So let's not waste any time, and let's begin. The road calls us tonight, but not the smooth, romanticized path of mosaics and triumphal arches. We are leaving Philippi with Paul, not for a Sunday school lesson, but for the brutal, kilometer-by-kilometer reality of the Roman Empire's vast highway system. Before the long walk begins, take a moment to settle in. This journey will not require faith. It will require boots of iron, a stomach of lead, and a body you are willing to watch fall apart. The world of AD 50 is unforgiving, and we are travelers in a land where every milestone marker is a quiet warning. Our destination is Thessalonica, and our first lesson in survival is that the road itself is trying to kill you. You have survived the farewells, the dubious hospitality of the local Christians, and the first few stumbling steps out of the city gates. Now, your education truly begins. You look down at the massive artery stretching before you. The Via Egnatia, the Queen of Roads, Rome's great diagonal line across the Balkans. It is supposed to be a marvel of engineering, a pathway for civilization. But to your eyes, it is merely a treadmill of punishment. The road itself is a cruel, dual-faced entity. Where it is maintained, it is a parade ground of hard, sharp paving stones, basalt slabs fitted together so tightly they could last 1,000 years. For the legionary or the imperial messenger, this is a blessing. For your soft civilian feet, wrapped only in cheap, thin-soled sandals, it is a continuous, bone-jarring insult. The relentless pounding quickly turns your soles into tenderized meat. Every imperfection in the stonework, every raised edge or small crevice, transmits a shockwave of discomfort up your shin bones. You realize, with a shudder, that this road was not built for walking. It was built for marching. And you are not a marching man. You are merely cargo, fragile and poorly packaged, being bumped along a route designed for chariots and legions. If the Roman concept of travel was comfort, they would have invented a cushioned wheel. Instead, they invented concrete and the whip. But the sheer distance between Philippi and Thessalonica, over 100 Roman miles, or about 160 modern kilometers, is what truly breaks the spirit. Your party, led by Paul, whose spirit burns hot despite his physical frailty, averages about 15 to 20 miles a day. This means 8 full, agonizing days of continuous forward movement. There is no rest day, no chance for the blisters to heal, just the relentless, sun-beaten demand for another day's journey. The distance is a metaphysical weight, pressing down on your shoulders more heavily than your own pitiful pack. Worse than the paved sections are the stretches where the road maintenance has failed or never began. Here, the beautiful, hard slabs disappear, replaced by a rough, uneven track of compacted dirt, loose stones, and fine, choking dust. This fine yellowish powder rises with every step of every traveler, forming a permanent low-hanging cloud that settles over the Via Egnatia like a curse. You breathe it in, tasting the dry earth and the pulverized dung of 100,000 animals. It coats your throat, gums up your sinuses, and settles on your skin, mixing with sweat to form a grimy, itching film. The dust isn't just irritating, it is blinding and dangerous. When a military cohort or a wealthy patron's carriage speeds past, and they will speed past, the cloud they kick up is momentarily absolute. You are forced to stumble blindly off the path, praying you don't trip over a hidden stone or accidentally veer into a drainage ditch. These rapid, unexpected encounters with Rome's elite serve as brutal reminders of your own insignificance on their highway. Even when the road is clear, you must contend with the agger, the high, crowned center of the road, designed to facilitate drainage. This means that if you walk on the edge, you are walking perpetually tilted, straining the muscles on one side of your body. If you walk on the center, you constantly vie for space with the wheeled traffic, risking being clipped by an axle or crushed by a slow-moving, massive ox cart loaded with marble. You quickly learn to prefer the mud or the dust of the shoulder to the unforgiving crown. And the travelers themselves are almost as much of a threat as the road surface. This is a public highway, not a private trail, and you are sharing it with everyone. Aggressive mule drivers, stern-faced tax collectors, loud and drunken soldiers, and wandering vagabonds with nothing to lose. The flow of human and animal traffic is ceaseless, confusing, and potentially hostile. You must keep your wits about you, not just for safety, but for simple navigation, constantly dodging, weaving, and stepping aside. The road is a brutal, objective truth, a mechanical monster designed to minimize time for the state and maximize suffering for the common man. You are now days away from the familiar gates of Philippi, and the novelty of the journey has been crushed under the weight of sheer physical fatigue. Your feet are throbbing, your lips are cracked, and your mouth is dry. You would give anything for a deep, long drink of clean, cool water to wash away the dust and the taste of the road. But you will soon discover that even this simple necessity is fraught with its own deadly risks. The roads may demand your strength, but the water demands your life. The memory of the road's dust, gritty and metallic on your tongue, has sharpened your thirst into a desperate, immediate need. You reach for your water skin, but the last remnants have long since warmed to the temperature of weak tea left too long in the sun, and the supply is gone. Your eyes, strained and red, now scan the desolate landscape, not for bandits or milestone markers, but for the glint of water, any water, promising relief. You are traveling with the Apostle Paul, a man who knows the deserts and the rough trails, yet even he cannot conjure fresh springs in this parched land. His reliance is on providence. Yours must be on luck and the meager infrastructure provided by the empire. You finally spot it, a small, man-made cistern near a minor fort, fed by what looks like a runoff from the higher hills. The water is murky, a pale brown from the churned earth, but it is water, and your body is screaming. In your haste, You ignore the sensible warnings of your companions, including the silent disapproval from Paul. You have spent the last decade in the relative safety of Roman cities, believing the stone aqueducts brought clean water. You forget that the empire's impressive plumbing was designed to move volume, not guarantee purity. Aqueducts collected water from wide catchments, crossing swamps, and passing through city limits, where they were often tapped by plumbers using soft lead pipes. Every sip you took in the city was already a minor gamble, but this roadside pool is a full-blown lottery. You plunge your water skin into the cool, opaque liquid, watching the silt swirl. You take a long, deep drink, and for a moment, the relief is profound, a stunning physical pleasure that eclipses all fear. But the aftertaste is immediate, a faint, coppery metallic tang, a whisper of rot, and the unmistakable musk of animal waste. You swallow, knowing immediately that you have done something terrible to your internal landscape. This isn't a spring fed by pure glacial melt. It is a catch basin where every mule, dog, and passing traveler has relieved themselves upstream. It is a biological time bomb ticking in your gut. The ancient world did not understand germs, but it understood the consequences. They knew that when the great unwashed masses drank this locus infectus, this place of infection, they invited the green death. Dysentery, cholera, typhoid. These are not quick, clean deaths. They are deaths of agonizing, relentless internal betrayal. They begin with that sudden, sharp cramp in your abdomen, a tightening that pulls you double and leaves you gasping. Then comes the fever, a burning heat that makes the sun's oppressive warmth feel like an ice bath by comparison. You become delirious, confused, unable to track the progress of the journey, turning the road into a swirling, hostile dreamscape. The most terrifying aspect is the utter helplessness. Paul may possess a capacity for healing, but even he cannot undo the bacterial invasion that is now colonizing your intestines. Your body is turning against you, expelling all moisture and nutrient in a violent, unending cascade. You become a drain, a sieve, a rapidly shrinking sack of skin and bones. The Roman remedy would be harsh wine, perhaps some magical incantation, or maybe a dose of lead-laced medicine from a dubious physician at the next town. But the only true cure is time and luck. You stumble along, now focused entirely on managing the internal chaos. Every step is a risk, every moment a battle to remain upright and coherent. The dust of the road no longer feels like an irritant. It feels like the dry ground you might soon collapse upon. You try to reassure yourself that the Romans built sanitary drainage. You try to remember the lesson that wine was safer because it killed the pathogens. But you didn't have wine. You had desperation. The sun begins its slow descent, painting the dusty hillsides in a bloody, unforgiving orange. But you barely notice. You are entirely consumed by the low, gurgling protest of your stomach. The sharp, searing pain is no longer a warning. It is a confirmed sentence. You clutch your side, leaning heavily on the staff you bought back in Philippi. The one small, painful purchase that felt like a luxury then, and now feels like the only thing keeping you from the earth. The realization hits you with the force of a hammer blow. This pain is a direct consequence of your own haste, a grim reminder that contaminated water is often caused by what is eaten near its source. You need to keep moving, but the next few miles will be spent focusing not on the next town, but on the next bush, setting the stage for the next necessity of life, the dangers of the stale rations waiting in your pack. The water demanded your life, and the food will surely follow. The internal storm rages on, fueled by the foul water, but your body is still demanding fuel. The great irony of this journey is that you must eat to gain strength, yet the available food is either actively harmful or barely sufficient to keep your legs moving. With the fear of the water still fresh in your mind, you must now turn to the unappealing contents of your pack. The soldier's rations, the food of the lowborn, the culinary choices forced by a severely restricted budget. You pull out a disc of buccellatum, the infamous biscuit of the Roman military. This is not the fluffy bread you might have enjoyed in a city bakery. It is a brick of barley flour, dried and twice baked until it achieves the tensile strength and moral integrity of fired ceramic. It is designed to last for months, perhaps years, and it performs this task with grim efficiency. To consume it, you must first soak it in water, a dangerous proposition now, or oil, chipping off small, gravelly pieces that chew like hard rubber. Every bite is an act of effort, a jaw-aching reminder that nutrition is secondary to preservation. Paul himself subsists on a diet that is even more austere, though driven by principle rather than poverty. His is a diet of humility, dried fruit, lentils, and the occasional piece of fish bought cheap or given by a struggling host. But for you, the traveler without Paul's spiritual conviction, your humble fare is dictated by the denarius in your purse. You must buy what is cheap, and cheap means old, poor quality, and likely adulterated. You recall the whispers you heard back in the market about the quality of the olive oil. Olive oil, the foundation of the Mediterranean diet, was often cut with cheaper, even toxic substances, rendered animal fats, or oil so rancid it was barely recognizable. The oil you carry, bought from a shady stall just before leaving Philippi, has a slightly acrid, bitter finish. You use it sparingly, drizzling it over the hard barley mash, hoping that its primary effect is lubrication rather than poisoning. Rancid oil doesn't just taste bad, it contains chemical compounds that degrade the stomach further, adding to the turmoil started by the cursed cistern water. You compare your sad rations to the imaginary feasts of the Roman elite. Pheasant cooked in rich sauces, delicate pastries, and imported wines. Your diet is a testament to your status. You are poor, you are exposed, and you are dispensable. The low-grade barley flour is often infested with weevils, or worse, mixed with ground chalk or gypsum by unscrupulous millers to add weight. You are eating the culinary equivalent of debt, a gritty, unappetizing blend of cheap fillers and ancient grains. The constant consumption of coarse, unprocessed barley bread grinds at your intestinal lining, contributing to the general state of distress. You watch as a wealthy merchant's party stops 100 yards ahead, their cook preparing a small fire, the scent of roasting, meat wafting temptingly in the dusty air. They are protected by guards, supported by servants, and insulated from the road's harsh realities. Your small group, meanwhile, squats by the side of the road, chewing slowly, silently, trying to avoid the attention that comes with even a hint of visible wealth. Paul eats with a quiet thankfulness that seems misplaced given the taste of the meager meal. But his focus is on the journey's spiritual goal, not the sensory failures of the food. As you scrape the last hard crumbs from your bowl, a momentary sound interrupts the silence. A distant shout, quickly muffled, followed by the sight of a lone rider galloping back toward the direction you just came from. A nervous murmur runs through your group. One of the other travelers, a taciturn man named Silas, glances sharply at Paul, and then at the small pouch you hastily tucked away under your cloak. Silas mutters a chilling tale about a fellow who was tracked for days after foolishly displaying a newly acquired gold coin at a market stall. The bandits, Silas says, are not always interested in food. They are interested in hope, in the currency that represents a life better than theirs. The tale immediately pivots your focus from the internal ravages of your digestive system to the external, immediate threat of human violence. The food was painful, but the money is deadly, setting the stage for the terrifying danger of the brigand and the sudden, brutal reality of Roman banditry. The journey has now transformed from a test of endurance into a game of fear. After the unsettling tale of the bandits, your eyes dart nervously between the dense foliage of the hills and the faces of every passing stranger. But the danger is not always concealed in the shadows. Often, it rides openly on the road, wearing the uniform of the Roman state. You realize that your life is not only threatened by the lawless brigand, but also by the capricious, casual, and overwhelming power of the legal authority. The ultimate symbol of this authority is the fasces, a bundle of wooden rods strapped around an axe, carried by the lictors who accompany Roman magistrates. The rods symbolize the power to inflict corporal punishment, flogging, or beating, and the axe represents the power of capital punishment. You may be a citizen of a town under Roman rule, but on this road, far from the protective layers of your own local courts, you are vulnerable to the immediate judgment of any passing official. Even a simple, poorly phrased response to a question could escalate instantly into violence. You watch one afternoon as a small group of soldiers accosts a local farmer leading a donkey. The donkey had wandered too close to a baggage cart belonging to a minor Roman official. There is no trial, no argument, only the immediate, terrifying reality of power exercised without restraint. The soldier, barely breaking stride, pulls a light hickory cane from his belt and lands a sharp, whistling blow across the back of the farmer, not out of malice, but out of routine contempt. The casual brutality sends a deep, chilling tremor through your own chest. This is the ever-present threat of Roman coercitio, the power to compel or punish, which is often applied arbitrarily to maintain order and enforce social hierarchy. To a soldier, a provincial traveler like you is little more than a potential inconvenience, a piece of animated dirt that must be cleared from the path. You learn quickly how to become invisible, lowering your gaze, keeping your hands visible, and speaking only when spoken to, and then only in the most deferential Greek or Latin you can manage. The law does not protect you. The law wields the weapon against you. Paul himself is a living testament to this reality, having often suffered the whip. you are acutely aware that accompanying him only increases the risk. Your affiliation with a man who preaches a destabilizing foreign god is a direct challenge to the Roman Pax Deorum, the peace of the gods, and therefore to the peace of Rome itself. If you are caught in a public disturbance, which Paul is prone to inciting with his vigorous preaching, the immediate consequence is not an arrest, but a beating designed to humiliate and discourage. Imagine the magistrate's order: strip him and bind him. The rods fall with a shocking, tearing sound, designed to flay the skin and tear muscle. It is not just the physical pain that threatens you, it is the utter loss of dignity, the public degradation that marks you as a troublemaker, a warning to others. A severe enough beating, 39 lashes, the traditional maximum imposed by Jewish law, or a similar number by Roman whim, could cripple you for life, making the rest of the journey unthinkable. This fear of the whip forces you into a state of continuous nervous tension. Every shout, every raised voice, every encounter with a helmeted figure makes your heart pound like a drum. You are constantly monitoring the mood of the powerful, the slightest shift in a soldier's expression, the quick movement of a lictor's hand. It is a psychological assault that is almost as draining as the endless walking. As you successfully navigate a particularly tense encounter with a pair of cavalrymen, a wave of relief washes over you, quickly followed by a dull, throbbing pain behind your eyes. The dust, the tension, and the relentless glare of the sun have combined to give you a blinding headache. The heat of the day, which has been oppressive since mid-morning, is suddenly unbearable. You stagger slightly, the brutal energy of the sun overcoming your body's defenses. The fear of human violence gives way to the immediate, crushing environmental factors. The sun is your new torturer, and the unforgiving sky demands immediate submission. The immediate, stabbing pain in your skull is the final surrender of your body to the relentless Mediterranean sun. For hours, you have been battling the oppressive heat of the Macedonian summer. In the ancient world, this kind of solar exposure is not merely uncomfortable. It is a life-threatening, invisible enemy. You have no broad-brimmed hats, only a thin cloth tied around your head, offering pathetic resistance to the solar assault. The intensity of the daylight is dizzying. The white dust of the road reflects the light back at your face with punishing brilliance, burning your eyes even when squinted shut. The heat doesn't just warm the air, it suffocates it, drawing the moisture out of your skin, your breath, your very bones, leaving you hollow and desiccated. You feel the slow, terrifying onset of hyperthermia, where the body's cooling system simply gives up. You stop sweating, and your skin, rather than being clammy, becomes alarmingly hot and dry to the touch. Your thoughts begin to drift. You become confused, mistaking distant trees for approaching travelers, or seeing mirages of water that only deepen your thirst. This delirium is sunstroke, a swift killer on the Roman road. It can lead to collapse, unconsciousness, and, without immediate relief, death. You are forced to lean on Paul, whose own internal reserves seem to be superhuman, while the others quickly fetch small amounts of precious water to sponge your forehead and the back of your neck. But the danger of the Mediterranean climate is not static. It swings violently. The sun's brutality is eventually replaced by the chilling cold of the night. As the sun dips beneath the horizon, the ground, which was baking hot just an hour ago, begins to radiate its heat outward, plunging the air temperature into a startling, bitter chill. You lack proper bedding, relying only on your thin cloak and the dusty ground. Sleep, when it comes, is fitful, anxious, and deeply unsatisfying. The cold of the night is a threat of its own. Hypothermia. Your body, already weakened by the heat of the day and the internal turmoil from the bad water, has no reserve energy left to warm itself. You shiver uncontrollably, your muscles tensing and relaxing in a continuous, exhausting battle against the air. You try to burrow into the earth, pressing yourself against the remaining warmth of a large stone, but the cold permeates everything. You find yourself constantly battling the environment with insufficient gear. When the wind picks up, it feels like a physical lash, driving the fine dust into your eyes and ears, and making the cold feel twice as biting. You envy the wealthy traveler with his wool blankets and enclosed carriage. Your vulnerability to these extreme, instantaneous temperature swings is a constant tax on your body's health, ensuring that you enter the next day already exhausted, already compromised. You stare at the silhouettes of the hills against the fading light, noting how the shadows are long and distorted. The temperature is dropping rapidly, and the sky is turning from violent orange to a deep, star-choked black. The cold, however, brings a new sense of fear, a primal anxiety that the darkness is not empty. As your eyes adjust, you notice a particularly dense, unkempt patch of scrub forest just off the road ahead. The trees are gnarled and dark, and the air around them seems heavier, quieter. You realize that this is where the unseen things thrive, the non-human threats that awaken with the dusk, shifting the danger once more from the sky and the state to the primal, biological world. You begin to fear what creeps in the shadows of the wild and what dangers that darkness holds for your tired, vulnerable body. The simple geography of the land now hints at scorpions, snakes, and the silent, slithering terrors of the roadside. The setting sun, which moments ago promised only a frigid night, now feels like a merciful reprieve from the heat. But the darkness it brings is a heavy, primal blanket of fear. You are hunkered down just off the Via Ignacia, and the trees and dense scrub that line the road are no longer just scenery. They are the frontier of the Silva, the wild, which in the Roman mind is synonymous with danger, disorder, and the non-human threats that awaken when civilized man sleeps. You feel profoundly exposed, a fragile, soft body resting on ground that is alive with things that bite, sting, and carry invisible pestilence. Your eyes, now adjusted to the dim light, strain to see movement among the roots and deadfall. The ancient world was a place where human presence did not necessarily mean safety, but the wilderness, the uncultivated land, was a confirmed hostile territory. You are now guests in the domain of the creatures who care nothing for Paul's preaching or Caesar's roads. You are merely warm-blooded intruders, and your body is a target. The immediate, most intimate threats are the arachnids and the serpents. You dare not remove your sandals, thin as they are, even for a moment's comfort. Every small, hollowed-out space, every slight depression in the dirt, could harbor a viper, coiled and sluggish from the evening chill, or worse, a scorpion. The scorpions of the Mediterranean are small, efficient instruments of pain. You imagine the sudden, searing agony of a sting, a venom that doesn't kill quickly, but incapacitates, leaving you convulsing and feverish, an impossible burden for your weary companions to carry. The fear of stepping on one is so acute that you move with a kind of exaggerated, delicate terror, shuffling your feet as if walking on glass. The snakes are quieter, more insidious. They are often drawn to the roads themselves, warming themselves on the residual heat of the stone, or seeking the vermin that follow the human route. Paul would later recount a story of being bitten by a viper in Malta, shaking it off into the fire. But you know you lack Paul's divine protection or sheer luck. A viper bite here, miles from any physician, means swelling, systemic pain, and a very real chance of losing the limb or losing consciousness entirely, leaving you helpless when the true predators arrive. You listen to the dry rustle of the leaves, interpreting every sound as the slither of scales on dust. Beyond the immediate bite, there is the continuous, grinding menace of the insect pests that vector disease. Mosquitoes, dense swarms of midges, and various biting flies descend as soon as the wind dies down. They are not merely annoyances. They are flying syringes carrying the ancient scourges of malaria and leishmaniasis. You try to wrap your cloak tightly around your exposed skin, but the heat of your body is an irresistible beacon to them. You know that if you contract the quartan fever, malaria, your journey is effectively over. You will be consumed by cycles of debilitating chills and burning fevers, turning you into a wasted liability long before you ever reach Thessalonica. Even worse are the smaller, unseen terrors that live on you. Lying on the ground means inviting the invasion of fleas and lice. In this era, these pests are not just dirty. They are the primary vectors of typhus, the disease that truly decimated ancient populations. As you try to rest, you feel the itching, the tiny pinprick bites, knowing that each one is a roll of the dice. You can never truly relax, because relaxation means inviting the slow biological contamination of your body. The psychological toll of this constant exposure is immense. You are forced to sleep with one eye open, alert not just to the sound of human footsteps, but to the crack of a dry branch or the sudden squeak of a field mouse. The Roman traveler's pervasive fear of the Silva comes not from fanciful tales, but from this reality, that the natural world outside the road's thin boundary is indifferent to human life and often actively hostile toward it. You are reminded of the stories of wolves and wild dogs, drawn to the scent of the unwashed and the weak, though these are thankfully less common near this well-traveled highway. But the most chilling sound you hear is the dry, rhythmic clicking of beetles in the nearby dry grass. It is a subtle noise, easily ignored by a mind that isn't attuned to the wilderness, but it reminds you that the ground itself is alive and crawling. You imagine the larvae, the grubs, and the countless things that will consume you should you fall. The earth is not a cradle. It is a waiting stomach. You spend the long hours of darkness in a state of hypervigilance, dozing in short, anxious bursts, constantly slapping at an itch or scanning the ground near your head. The sun finally begins its ascent, pushing back the shadows and bringing a renewed, if temporary, sense of security. You stand stiffly, brushing the grit and debris from your cloak, feeling less rested than when you lay down. Paul, seemingly refreshed by his unwavering faith, urges the group forward. You stumble back onto the paved road, grateful for the man-made stones and the distance from the terrifying, teeming shadows of the forest. The survival instincts you cultivated in the wild must now be immediately adapted, for the day's journey leads you not back to the quiet road, but to the oppressive noise and human dangers of a major port town where you must secure passage. The natural hostility of the Silva is being replaced by the compressed chaos of the human swarm. The relief of escaping the Silva is short-lived, replaced almost instantly by the oppressive sensation of being crushed beneath the weight of human density. You have reached Neapolis, or perhaps Amphipolis, a significant coastal hub where the Via Egnatia intersects with the maritime trade routes. The air changes dramatically as you approach the city walls. The clean, dry dust of the road gives way to a thick, humid, and overwhelming stench. It is the smell of unwashed bodies, stale fish, wood smoke, rancid oil, and, most prominently, the open sewage that flows sluggishly in the gutters. This is not the romanticized city of marble temples and gleaming forums seen on Roman coins. This is the working city, the crowded, disease-ridden nexus of commerce, where you must find passage and lodging. The dockyards are a symphony of chaos, shouting merchants haggling in 3 different languages, the creak of enormous cranes, the cries of slaves loading massive amphorae, and the constant, unnerving movement of people who seem to be perpetually on the edge of a fight. You are an easily identifiable outsider, tired and conspicuously poor, and the city's immediate response is to treat you as a resource to be exploited or a nuisance to be ignored. Your focus is the insulae, the towering, rickety tenement buildings that house the vast majority of the city's population. These structures are built quickly and poorly, packed tightly together like decaying teeth. They soar 3 or 4 stories high, constructed from cheap timber and inadequate brick, leaning precariously into the narrow streets. Every landlord and builder has prioritized profit over stability, and the inherent danger of collapse is palpable. You are constantly scanning the upper stories, fearing the sudden, grinding rumble that means one of these buildings has finally given way, burying dozens of poor souls beneath its rotten foundations. The streets themselves are barely navigable. They are narrow, darkened trenches, clogged with debris, stray animals, and the overflow from cesspits. The lack of proper sanitation is horrifyingly visible. The wealthy have drains, but everyone else relies on slop buckets thrown carelessly out of upper windows. You walk in a state of continuous dread, dodging both the filth on the ground and the effluent raining down from above, which could carry any number of deadly pathogens. The stench is so powerful it feels like a physical thing, clinging to your clothes and making your eyes water. Finding lodging is a transaction weighed heavily against you. You seek out a capona or a cheap hospitium, knowing that the low price guarantees squalor. The rooms offered are tiny, dark, and often shared with strangers who look even more desperate than you are. The walls are thin, meaning you are privy to every argument, every drunken boast, and every terrified whisper. The bedding, if any exists, is likely infested with bedbugs and fleas, carrying the risk of typhus, a terror far greater than the nightly risk of fire. The threat of fire, however, is very real. These wooden tenements, crammed together and reliant on open flame for cooking and light, often turn into roaring infernos. A fire in one building quickly consumes the entire block, and the narrow, chaotic streets ensure that escape is nearly impossible. You try to choose a room near a window or an exterior stairwell, but every choice feels like a gamble between being robbed in your sleep or being trapped and burned alive. If you choose to save the few denarii and sleep exposed on the docks, the dangers are different, but equally grim. The docks are the domain of petty criminals, cutthroats, and opportunists. Sleep is impossible. You are constantly on guard for the swift, silent slash of a knife and the loss of your few belongings. The chilling cold of the harbor air seeps into your bones, and the rats, bold and diseased, scurry over your feet with impunity. They are drawn by the refuse and the promise of easy scraps, and they are immune to your fearful shoeing. The most unnerving reality is the rampant theft. Everyone here is looking to survive, and your pack, despite its meager contents, represents a small bounty. You keep your few coins hidden in a secret pocket sewn into your tunic, knowing that being robbed of your papers, your money, or even your sandals means the end of your journey and a swift descent into utter destitution. You are in a human jungle, and the predator is hunger and desperation. As you stand near the main commercial street, trying to decipher the signs for passage, a man with a rough, stained tunic and perpetually nervous eyes approaches Paul. He speaks in quick, clipped Greek, asking if Paul is perhaps a worker, a carpenter or tent maker who might know of any able hands looking for temporary labor on the docks. He speaks of unloading a shipment of Syrian oil, a few days' hard work for a little copper coinage. Paul politely declines, but the encounter leaves a metallic taste of fear in your mouth. The man's desperate need, his searching look, suggests a constant search for cheap, replaceable bodies. It is a chilling reminder that the line between a poor traveler and a commodity is razor thin, hinting at the true cost of being an easily acquired worker and the immense risk of falling into debt slavery. Escaping the city's immediate squalor only leads to the potential of a lifetime's bondage. The brief interaction with the merchant searching for cheap hands has cracked open a terrifying, universal truth of the Roman world: the casual commerce of human flesh. Slavery is not a distant, theoretical institution. It is the lubricant of the entire empire, and on the road, your personal freedom is merely a temporary status maintained by luck and the lack of a better offer. You realize with a sickening clarity that your body, already beaten by the road and starved by the rations, is worth more to a merchant as property than it is to yourself as a free man. The markets you must walk through are not just for selling fish and grain. They are also for selling men, women, and children. The slave markets are visible, bustling, and horrifyingly mundane. You see the groups of newly captured individuals, often stripped, oiled, and displayed like livestock. Their terror and exhaustion marketed as docility and strength. Their prices fluctuate based on their skill, age, and physical condition. You avert your eyes, but the sight and the knowledge of their fate settle deep in your core. For a traveler like you, the danger is multifaceted. The immediate, terrifying threat is kidnapping. Bandits, organized crime syndicates, and opportunistic thieves often skip the hassle of negotiation and simply seize their product. A brief moment of inattention, a wrong turn down a dark alley in the port slums, or a lapse of consciousness from sickness could lead to you being shackled and gagged, waking up days later on a ship bound for a mine in Spain or a villa in Rome. The justice system offers no recourse. Your papers are easily lost or forged, and your claim to freedom is worthless when countered by a wealthy dealer. There is also the profound fear of being mistaken for a runaway slave. The empire maintains strict laws regarding fugitive slaves, and the consequences for being caught, or simply suspected, are brutal. The burden of proof is always on you, the poor traveler with rough clothes and no immediate benefactor. If a Roman patrol officer decides you look like a missing servant, your protests of freedom are met with immediate, violent skepticism. You would be immediately whipped, interrogated, and, if your documentation is not impeccable, sold on the spot. Your value as a commodity supersedes any legal claim to personhood. The reality of your association with Paul adds another layer of jeopardy. Paul, the tent maker, often works with his hands and preaches a gospel of spiritual freedom and equality before God, doctrines that are fundamentally subversive to the slave economy. If your group is captured and your affiliation to a Judean sect is revealed, your resale value may drop, but your immediate suffering will intensify. The fear is that the authorities or a disgruntled slave owner will use the lash not just to punish, but to extract information about the nascent Christian movement. You observe the silent language of the slaves as you move through the city, their downcast eyes, their subtle shifts in posture to accommodate their bonds, the sheer, crushing weight of their labor. They are everywhere. Rowing ships, hauling freight, running messages, cleaning streets. They are the background texture of the empire, and their proximity is a grim mirror of your own fragility. One careless step, one expensive medical bill you cannot pay, one unfortunate accusation, and you could join their ranks instantly. The concept of debt slavery, though technically less common in this era than in earlier Roman history, remains a stark shadow. If you suffer a severe injury or fall desperately ill, Paul might use his small funds to secure a room or a physician. But if those funds run out, or if you become indebted to a local merchant for supplies, you could be forced to pledge your labor and your person until the debt is repaid. For a sick and compromised body, that is often a life sentence. The knowledge that your body is a walking, breathing financial asset is strangely paralyzing. It forces a calculated risk assessment in every interaction. Is this person watching my pack? Are they watching my health? Do I appear too weak to be worth kidnapping? or just weak enough to be easily subdued? You successfully navigate the dense, unsettling crowd near the shipbrokers, your nerves frayed, but your freedom intact. You manage to secure a simple passage across the Aegean, paying a meager sum to a captain whose vessel looks worryingly ill-maintained. Escaping the suffocating moral and physical danger of the port city is a relief. But as you step onto the gangplank, the solid ground beneath your feet gives way to the rocking deck. You have traded the casual brutality of the slave market for the indifferent, overwhelming power of the open sea. You manage to secure passage on a rickety merchant vessel, only to realize the open sea holds dangers far greater than the land. For the ocean does not care about Roman law or human life. It only obeys the wind. The merchant vessel is not the sleek trireme warship of imperial propaganda. It is a clumsy, rounded navis honoraria, a simple cargo boat built for capacity, not comfort or speed. The deck you stand on is sticky with brine and the dried remnants of its last cargo, which might have been anything from rough timber to stinking vats of garum, the fermented fish sauce so beloved by the Romans. The ship is a floating, open-air warehouse, and you are merely human ballast packed around the main cargo hold. The journey begins not with a joyful casting off, but with a sudden, sickening lurch as the ship pulls away from the dock. Almost immediately, the sea asserts its authority over your equilibrium. You are afflicted by chronic, debilitating seasickness, a continuous state of nausea that reduces you to a retching, miserable mess. The deck becomes your torture chamber. The movement is ceaseless, unpredictable, a combination of rolling, pitching, and yawing that turns your stomach inside out. Food is impossible. Water is barely tolerable. You are losing precious fluids, exhausting your body, and spending most of your time huddled over the rail, adding your own misery to the ocean's vast indifference. The sheer physical misery is compounded by the sensory overload. The smell is oppressive and unavoidable. It is a mix of wet wool, stale bodies who have been at sea for weeks, the lingering stench of whatever putrefied cargo was carried previously, and the omnipresent, sickly sweet odor of salt, sweat, and vomit. There is no privacy whatsoever. You are forced to rest wherever you can find a small, open space on the deck, perpetually exposed to the elements and the uncaring glances of the crew and other passengers. The accommodations are non-existent. There are no bunks, no cabins, only the rough deck planks. You try to sleep curled up against a rope coil or next to a stack of amphorae, but the movement of the ship and the noise of the wind and the creaking timber make restful sleep an impossibility. The crew, hardened by months at sea, move constantly, shouting orders in rough nautical Greek, forcing you to shift your position repeatedly, never allowing your exhausted body to truly settle. You observe the cargo with growing unease. These merchant vessels were notoriously overloaded to maximize profit. The deck is crowded with heavy bales, sacks of grain, and enormous clay jars. The sheer weight makes the ship sit low in the water, decreasing its stability and making it vulnerable to even moderate waves. You nervously listen to the creak and groan of the hull timbers, sounds that speak of stress and potential failure rather than endurance. Every knot, every splinter, every loose piece of rigging seems to be crying out under the relentless pressure of the sea. Furthermore, the threat of human danger is not entirely left on land. You are at the mercy of the captain and his crew. They are rough, superstitious, and often deeply suspicious of landlubbers, especially those carrying foreign doctrines like Paul's. If a storm hits, or if the journey goes sour, you are likely to be blamed for inciting the anger of the sea gods. You watch Paul closely, hoping his quiet prayers are sufficient to appease the tempestuous Roman deities that sailors rely on. But the most insidious threat is the cold, wet reality of the voyage itself. Even a light shower can soak your clothes, and the spray from the waves is continuous. You are constantly damp, your cloak heavy with water, and your skin chafed raw from the mixture of salt and friction. This continuous dampness opens up new opportunities for the infections that were merely waiting on the road. Chills, pneumonia, and festering saltwater sores that stubbornly refuse to heal. You watch the captain, a grizzled man with skin like dried leather, whose eyes have been fixed on the horizon for days. He suddenly mutters an unfamiliar phrase in a low voice and gestures toward the sky, pointing to a specific pattern in the clouds and the subtle shift in the wind's direction. The immediate, terrifying silence that falls over the crew is more frightening than any shout. The change in the wind is not a simple inconvenience. It is a recognized omen, a precursor to the true, overwhelming danger of the ancient seas. A violent storm that could, in a matter of hours, destroy the vessel and plunge you into the black oblivion of the deep. The slow misery of seasickness now escalates into the certainty of a fight for survival against the gods of the storm. The silence that fell over the ship when the captain signaled the change in the wind was a deep, terrifying hush. The quiet before the gods begin to speak their anger. You look out over the Aegean, and the familiar blue has turned to a bruised, turbulent gray. The clouds are no longer just clouds. They are a vast, churning ceiling, dropping quickly toward the water, giving the sky a low, oppressive weight. The ship, already heavy with cargo, begins to protest the changing conditions with deeper, more urgent creaks of its timber. This is the moment when the Mediterranean, typically a calm highway, remembers it is a wild, untamed sea, and that ancient vessels like this one are merely toys. The captain and his seasoned crew spring into action with a chilling efficiency, shouting orders that are lost almost immediately to the wind's rising shriek. They attempt to furl the massive square sail, but the sudden gale catches the cloth like an enormous fist, straining the ropes and the mast with violence. The ship begins to pitch and roll with such force that it is impossible to stand without being dashed against the railing or the heavy cargo. You are thrown onto the wet, sticky deck, clinging desperately to a coil of rope, your senses overwhelmed by the noise and the dizzying motion. This is the terror of the ancient shipwreck, a common and accepted disaster of the Roman age. Paul himself faced this fate multiple times, and now you understand why the fear of the sea was so profound. There is no rescue, no coast guard, and absolutely no means of survival beyond the grace of the waves. There are no lifeboats. Your only raft is a plank of wood, if you are lucky enough to grab one before the ship breaks apart. You look over the side and see the waves, which a moment ago were simple, rolling hills, now surging up into terrifying black mountains, capped with white foam that looks like the hungry teeth of the deep. The water begins to pour over the deck in enormous, cold sheets, washing away everything not tied down. Your meager belongings, your small pack, your sandals, your water skin, are instantly snatched by the current and swept away. You watch helplessly as a barrel of grain, weighing hundreds of pounds, slides across the deck, smashing into the rail with a horrifying crunch of splintering wood. The force is incredible, an elemental power that renders human strength meaningless. You realize the true danger is not drowning, but being pulverized by the cargo or the ship itself. Panic flares through the other passengers, a raw, animal terror that is contagious and dangerous. People begin to shout incoherent prayers to whatever deities they trust: Jupiter, Poseidon, the local gods of the harbor, promising sacrifices if only the storm would relent. The crew, equally terrified, tries to maintain order, but the ship is no longer obeying them. It is simply being driven. The mast cracks with a sound like a thunderclap, splitting halfway up its length and sending the enormous timber crashing down into the water, tearing away ropes and further destabilizing the vessel. The captain, his face white with fear and resignation, begins to give orders to jettison the heavy cargo, the same cargo that was meant to sustain the crew and bring wealth to the city. Jars of oil and wine, sacks of heavy metal, and perhaps even some of the low-value human cargo are ruthlessly pushed over the side to lighten the load, a desperate bid to keep the hull afloat. You cling tighter to Paul, your heart hammering against your ribs, knowing that the loss of all cargo means ruin, but the loss of life is final. The ultimate nightmare is the shallow water. If the ship were in the deep sea, it might sink quickly, offering a fast, cold end. But here, near the coast, the wind and waves are driving the heavy hull toward the shore, where the unseen rocks and reefs wait. The sound changes from the hollow groan of the hull to a dreadful grinding roar as the ship hits something hard beneath the water. The force is immense, throwing you violently from your handhold. You feel the hull ripping open, the sound of wood and water merging into one continuous, shattering cacophony. The final moments are a blur of freezing water, chaos, and absolute disorientation. You are tossed into the frigid sea, gulping down salt water, the sounds of the shipwreck, the screams, the splitting wood, drowned out by the rush in your ears. You kick and fight, surrounded by floating debris, a plank, a broken jar, the sad remnants of your journey. By some miracle, you manage to grab a piece of timber, and the relentless, driving power of the waves carries you toward the land. You are not swimming. You are merely being delivered. Hours later, half conscious and shivering uncontrollably, you are dragged onto a cold, desolate stretch of beach. The storm rages on offshore, but the land offers solid, if unforgiving, protection. You are alive. Your skin is raw, your mouth is full of sand, and your body is battered and bruised, but you breathe the air of the shore. You look around for Paul and your other companions, finding them equally exhausted and miraculously alive among the wreckage. Everything you owned, everything you needed is gone, swallowed by the sea. You are stranded, miles from the nearest civilization, with nothing but the wet clothes on your back and the immediate, crushing realization that the journey must begin again. But first, you must tend to the damage the road and the sea have inflicted on your own flesh. The water may have spared your life, but your body now demands attention, starting with the wounds of the journey. You stand on the desolate beach, the sand gritty between your raw, swollen toes, and the immediate fear of drowning recedes, replaced by the persistent internal complaint of your own body. The ordeal of the shipwreck, the salt water, and the cold only serve to exacerbate the continuous trauma inflicted by the road. The journey of the Apostle Paul is a story of faith, but your participation in it is a daily testament to the vulnerability of unarmored flesh in the ancient world. You are a walking testament to friction and poor hygiene. You peel off your wet, heavy sandals, a painful operation that reveals the true state of your feet. The blisters you developed days ago from the relentless pounding of the Via Egnatia have burst, rubbed raw by the seawater and the sand. Now they are open, weeping wounds, angry red patches where the skin has been entirely stripped away. This is not mere discomfort. This is a serious danger. Every patch of dirt, every piece of flotsam on the beach, and every drop of stagnant water from the shipwreck is a potential source of infection. You look at the most severe blister, now a large ragged area on your heel. It is no longer weeping clear fluid. The surrounding skin is flushed pink, hot to the touch, and there is a faint, unpleasant smell. This is the unmistakable sign of a localized infection, the kind that quickly turns into a painful, deep-seated abscess. Without intervention, this small wound can rage out of control. In the ancient world, a minor abrasion often spiraled into a systemic threat. The concept of a bandage is a luxury you do not possess. You are reduced to tearing a strip from the hem of your soaking tunic, a thin, dirty piece of linen that will likely introduce more bacteria than it removes. The act of cleaning the wound is agonizing. You use a small amount of fresh water salvaged by Paul, but the rinsing only serves to sting the raw flesh. There is no antiseptic, no alcohol, no iodine. You are relying on your own body's immune system, which is already weakened by days of poor food, chronic sleep deprivation, and the constant stress of the road and sea. The real fear is the slow, silent creep of gangrene. If the infection takes hold and spreads into the deeper tissues, cutting off blood flow, the limb will begin to turn black. You know the stories, the chilling sight of the purple and gray mottled skin, the foul, sickening odor, the high fever, and the delirium. Without amputation, performed by a barber surgeon under circumstances that are barely survivable themselves, gangrene is a certain and brutal death. It is the swift, invisible hand of the ancient world claiming the body that modern medicine takes for granted. It is not just your feet that suffer. The chafing from your wet, rough clothes, the continuous rubbing of the pack against your shoulder blades, and the scrapes sustained during the shipwreck have all created vulnerable entry points for disease. You inspect a long, angry scratch on your arm where you were tossed against the ship's rail. It is already swollen and red. Every minor physical indignity on this journey carries the potential to become a fatal complication. You find yourself observing Paul with a renewed sense of awe and confusion. How does he maintain his physical integrity? He has endured multiple floggings, wounds that should have festered and crippled him. He has been stoned, beaten with rods, and certainly exposed to every filth and disease of the Roman world. Yet, his body, though frail, seems resilient. You realize that his physical survival is as profound a miracle as his faith. The contrast between Paul's internal fortitude and your own agonizing physical reality is stark. While he speaks of spiritual strength and the endurance of faith, you can think of nothing but the throbbing heat emanating from your heel. Every twitch of pain demands your attention, breaking your concentration and draining your will. The sheer, persistent agony of these small, neglected injuries highlights the profound difference between surviving a moment of terror and surviving the long, corrosive aftermath. As you stand up, gingerly replacing your sandals over the makeshift linen wrapping, a wave of nauseating pain shoots from your heel up your calf. Each step is now a conscious, deliberate act of overriding agony. This pain is not an external threat. It is an internal tyrant, forcing you to move slowly, carefully, and with an exhausting focus. This simple, terrible physical affliction forces you to contemplate the sheer, unbelievable mental endurance Paul must possess. How can he focus on preaching, on teaching, when every movement is a spike of fire? The pain becomes a meditation on his iron will, setting the stage for the exploration of the immense psychological tax levied by this pilgrimage. The immediate, searing pain from your infected heel and the accumulated aches of the shipwreck have now begun to bleed into your consciousness, corrupting your mental landscape. The physical dangers of the journey, the water, the food, the storms, are terrible, but they are finite moments of crisis. The true, grinding enemy of the long-distance traveler in the ancient world is the continuous psychological degradation brought on by chronic sleep deprivation and relentless despair. You find yourself stumbling not just from physical exhaustion, but from a profound inability to find restorative rest. True sleep, the kind that heals the body and clears the mind, is impossible. Even when you find a momentary safe haven in a ditch or an open courtyard, your rest is immediately compromised by 1,000 anxieties. The fear of bandits, the fear of the Roman patrol, the fear of being mistaken for a slave, or the simple, undeniable fear of the vermin that crawl across your body. When you lie down, you feel the familiar, irritating crawl of fleas and lice, tiny irritants that prevent deep relaxation. You hear the scuttling of rats nearby, bold and unafraid of your presence, constantly forcing you to shift position. You are never truly alone, and you are never truly secure. This persistent, compromised rest leaves you perpetually weary, dulling your reflexes and eroding your emotional defenses. The lack of sleep alters your perception of reality. The days blur into an endless succession of dust, pain, and hunger. The journey loses its spiritual meaning and becomes a simple, mechanistic forward movement, a desperate shuffle. Your memory becomes unreliable, You forget conversations, misplace small objects, and often have to ask Paul to repeat simple directions. This mental fatigue is a weight that sits heavier on your spirit than your empty pack sits on your back. Worst of all is the grinding emotional despair, the crushing realization that there is no end in sight, no comfortable bed waiting, and no reliable certainty of the next meal or safe shelter. Every town you leave behind feels like a betrayal of safety, and every mile ahead feels like an impossible distance. You begin to question the purpose of it all. Why endure this pain, this filth, this constant proximity to death for a doctrine that seems to bring Paul more enemies than friends? This is where the true contrast with Paul becomes clearest. His internal engine is fueled by an inexhaustible, almost frightening conviction. He seems immune to the despair that wraps around you like a shroud. You witness him, after a day of walking on raw feet, spending the night hours dictating letters, praying, or counseling a nervous local convert. His mind is sharp, his purpose unwavering. His iron will is the only thing that appears to be separating your journey from a simple vagrancy. Your own thoughts turn inwards, becoming dark and corrosive. You are haunted by the memory of the past, the small comforts of your former life, the soft ground of your childhood home, the taste of clean water. These memories are not comforting. They are agonizing reminders of what you have lost and what you are risking. The despair threatens to make you stop, to simply sit by the side of the road and wait for the fever or the bandit to claim you. It would be easier to surrender to the dust than to force another step. You try to find solace in the shared misery of your companions, but even their exhaustion is a quiet pressure. You must hide your fear, your pain, and your doubt, lest you burden them further. This need to maintain a facade of strength is another drain on your already depleted mental resources. You are fighting an internal war against despair, while physically marching through a hostile world. The long, anxious night finally draws to a close, and you drift into a deep, heavy sleep just as the first gray light touches the eastern horizon. It is a sleep of pure exhaustion, devoid of dreams or comfort. You are startled awake not by the sun, but by a chilling, rhythmic sound that is instantly recognizable and utterly terrifying. The sound of approaching hoofbeats. Not the clumsy pace of a merchant's mule, but the coordinated, rapid beat of multiple horses on the hard Roman road. Your heart leaps into your throat as the dread of human authority, the lictor's authority, rushes back into your immediate reality. You scramble desperately for the scant cover, knowing that this early morning encounter could only mean trouble, setting the stage for the terrifying inspection of the Roman patrol. The sound of the horses is the sound of Rome itself. Efficient, powerful, and utterly indifferent to your meager existence. You quickly flatten yourself against a low, thorny bush, pulling your ragged cloak over your face, praying that the dust and the shadows of the dawn will render you invisible. The fear is palpable, a cold, dry taste in your mouth, a complete reversal of the mental despair that consumed you minutes earlier. You are fully awake now, focused entirely on the threat bearing down on you. It is a Roman patrol, perhaps a small detachment of legionaries, or more likely, a group of local auxiliaries accompanied by a lictor, the magistrate's attendant. They are moving with purpose, their gear clanking rhythmically, their horses kicking up a fresh cloud of the ever-present road dust. They are not bandits. They are far more dangerous, for they operate with the full, unquestioned sanction of the empire. Their purpose is to maintain order. And your appearance, a group of poor, foreign vagrants camping illegally by the road, is the very definition of disorder. They slow as they approach your small, huddled group. The lead officer, perhaps a centurion or simply a local official with an inflated sense of authority, pulls his horse to a halt. The lictor, carrying the fasces, the bundle of rods, and the axe, stands silent, the symbol of instant, brutal justice towering over you. The patrol's casual, bored brutality is often worse than outright malice. They are looking for trouble, and if they cannot find it, they are perfectly willing to create it. The officer barks a question in harsh, rapid Latin, demanding to know your destination, your trade, and your business. Paul steps forward, showing his Roman citizenship papers, a temporary shield, but one that demands a measure of respect. But the officer's eyes linger on you. The dirt-stained foreigner with the frightened eyes and the telltale limp from your infected foot. You are a perfect candidate for inspection, harassment, or arrest. The interrogation is a tense performance of power. The officer views Paul's religious mission with open contempt, calling him a vagrant philosopher or a Jew-baiter who stirs up unnecessary trouble. He demands to see your papers, which, if you still possess them, are likely sodden and illegible after the shipwreck. If you have no papers, you are immediately classified as a runaway slave, a potential criminal, or simply a nuisance to be dealt with summarily. The legal line between a free man and a slave, or a citizen and a vagrant, is determined entirely by the mood of the man with the whip. The officer orders you to show your hands, checking for the calluses of honest labor, or perhaps the telltale markings that might identify you as a runaway. You expose your blistered, raw, and infected foot, a sight that earns you not pity, but suspicion. To the Roman mind, sickness and destitution often imply moral failure or criminal intent. You are not a victim of circumstance. You are a blot on the smooth fabric of imperial order. The lictor shifts his weight, the ominous rods catching the light. Corporal punishment is always the first resort. They are looking for an excuse to teach you a lesson, a quick flogging to discourage other undesirables from camping on their road. The violence is often gratuitous, designed to remind you of your low station. Even if they let you go, the beating would render you unable to walk for days, effectively ending your journey. Fortunately, Paul's calm, legalistic reply, and perhaps the sheer inconvenience of stopping for too long, saves you. After a tense, silent moment where the officer simply stares at your misery, he spits on the ground, gives a final warning about vagrancy, and wheels his horse around. The patrol gallops off down the road, leaving you trembling and physically sickened by the encounter. You have survived the storm and the plague, but this encounter with human law was arguably the most terrifying. The immediate threat is gone, but the fear lingers. You quickly pack the few remnants you salvaged, driven by the desire to put miles between yourself and that patrol. Paul's mission, however, demands that you enter a new, vibrant, and highly volatile city. As you crest the final hill and see the sprawling metropolis of Ephesus, or perhaps Corinth, a great hub of commerce, the initial excitement is quickly replaced by a sense of profound alienation. The city is alive with temples, shrines, and bustling cults. The worship of Diana/Artemis, the philosophers, the mystery religions. You are entering a land not just of wealth and poverty, but of powerful, clashing spiritual forces. You have survived the external threats of the wilderness and the sea, but now you must face the internal, ideological warfare of the Roman soul. The sprawling city of Ephesus or Corinth, the very embodiment of the Roman Empire's cosmopolitan nature, greets you not with open arms, but with a paralyzing cacophony. The moment you step through the gates, the silence of the countryside and the tense Latin of the patrol are replaced by an overwhelming, aggressive clamor. This is the Babel of the ancient world, and your simple Greek and rudimentary Latin are suddenly insufficient, rendering you functionally illiterate and painfully vulnerable. The dominant language is Koine Greek, the common tongue of the Eastern Mediterranean, but it is heavily laced with regional dialects, guttural Anatolian accents, and the rapid, technical slang of the harbor district. You struggle to comprehend the shouted negotiations, the angry exchanges between cart drivers, and the complex instructions from merchants. Everyone speaks too fast, too loud, and with too many local idioms, leaving you constantly a step behind, nodding vaguely when you should be asking a vital question. The language barrier is not a minor inconvenience. It is a profound safety hazard. You need to find shelter, water, and perhaps a small amount of work, but every attempt to communicate feels like walking into a cultural minefield. You try to ask a city guard for directions to the tent maker's district, and your simple, nervous Greek is misunderstood. He snaps back at you in Latin, assuming you are a foreign vagrant trying to hide your origins. Misinterpreting his tone, you hesitate, and he immediately raises his hand as if to strike, resorting to the universal language of threat and coercion. You quickly realize that in this city, a simple misunderstanding can escalate instantly into a beating or imprisonment, just as surely as offending the patrol on the open road. The danger of accidental offense is immense. Every city has its local customs, its sacred places, and its powerful guilds. Paul's mission demands that he speak publicly, often in the Jewish synagogues or the bustling lecture halls, and every word he utters is filtered through the prejudices and comprehension levels of a diverse crowd. You are his silent associate, and you must constantly monitor the emotional temperature of the listeners. Was that gesture you just made insulting to the local god? Did you stand in a spot reserved for a higher caste of citizen? The lack of shared understanding turns every movement into a risk. Imagine the simple act of trying to buy a loaf of bread. The baker speaks a crude, rapid dialect. He asks for a specific coin, perhaps a local denomination you do not recognize, and when you offer an incorrect silver coin, his face immediately twists into suspicion. Is he trying to cheat you? Are you accidentally trying to pass off counterfeit currency? The transaction becomes a tense negotiation where mutual suspicion is the rule, and your inability to fluently defend yourself leaves you perpetually exposed to being shortchanged or simply robbed in broad daylight. The presence of other languages adds to the disorientation. You hear the deep, commanding tones of Latin from Roman officials and merchants, the sing-song cadence of Syrian traders, and the strange, guttural sounds of visitors from the Black Sea region. The entire city is a swirling linguistic stew, and your mind, already weary from chronic sleep deprivation, struggles to filter the noise into coherent meaning. You feel mentally exhausted. Every simple task requiring an immense act of concentration just to avoid a social or legal blunder. This linguistic fatigue is profoundly isolating. You are surrounded by thousands of people, yet you cannot connect with any of them deeply. Paul has the gift of rhetoric, a deep knowledge of multiple languages and philosophical traditions, allowing him to navigate these treacherous waters. You, however, are forced to rely on his translations and his guidance, which only heightens your sense of dependence and helplessness. You are a shadow in a city full of vibrant, speaking individuals, and your silence is a sign of your vulnerability. The city's complexity is designed to crush the outsider. The confusing maze of streets and the lack of reliable signage, all in an unfamiliar script, means you are constantly getting lost. You walk miles in the wrong direction, doubling back, wasting precious time and energy, simply because you couldn't understand the complex directions given by a local. Every misdirection is a further drain on your physical reserves, stretching your blistered feet and increasing your exposure to the city's other, less invisible dangers. Finally, after hours of bewildered wandering and nervous exchanges, Paul secures a place to stay, a capona, a roadside inn, located just outside the main forum. The relief is instantaneous and absolute, promising a break from the tyranny of the street. But as you follow Paul through the sticky, low doorway, the air immediately hits you. A rank, humid wave of filth, stale wine, and body odor. You realize that you have exchanged the visible dangers of the city's political and linguistic minefields for the hidden, visceral perils of its squalid, crowded interior spaces. The road has tested your body and your freedom. The inn will now test your very ability to find safety and sleep among the lowest layers of Roman society. The Copona is a single, large, dark room, reeking of cheap wine and desperation. A temporary haven for travelers, mule drivers, and the city's low-end clientele. The relief you felt upon entering immediately curdles into profound distaste. The floor is packed earth, sticky with spilled beverages, animal droppings tracked in from the courtyard, and general human filth. The air hangs thick and warm, heavy with the stench of unwashed bodies and the sour odor of fermentation. This is not rest. It is merely a controlled form of exposure. The primary attraction of the inn is the promise of sleep, but the conditions here actively prevent it. You are directed to a shared sleeping area, often an attic or a gallery above the main room, where dozens of other travelers are packed tightly together. Privacy is non-existent. You are an elbow away from a snoring muleteer or a merchant nursing a fever. You must guard your meager possessions even while lying down, constantly aware of the quick, practiced hand of a pickpocket seeking an easy score in the darkness. The bedding, if you can call it that, is a pile of dirty, loose straw. This straw is the perfect habitat for every manner of ancient pestilence. Within minutes of settling in, you feel the itching begin, the unmistakable, insidious crawl of bedbugs and fleas. These tiny blood-sucking parasites are an inescapable part of life in the Roman hospitium. They not only deny you rest with their incessant biting, but also carry the very real threat of typhus, the terrifying plague that thrives in such close, unsanitary quarters. You scratch compulsively, a hopeless, weary gesture, knowing that every bite is a potential date with a life-threatening fever. The noise is constant and oppressive. The main room downstairs is a hub of drunken conviviality and sudden, violent arguments. The sound of shouting, the crash of cheap pottery, and the thud of fists against flesh is a continuous soundtrack to your attempted sleep. You lie rigid on the floor, listening intently, trying to discern if the current brawl is minor enough to ignore or serious enough to involve a knife, which would require immediate, silent flight. Sleep deprivation is compounded by this fear, ensuring that the heavy exhaustion you feel is never truly relieved. The sanitary conditions are appalling. The public latrine, if one exists, is a filthy, open trench, often shared with the cooking area, its stink permeating the entire establishment. The lack of clean water for washing means that every person in the room carries the accumulated filth of their journey, contributing to the generalized infection risk. You try to avoid touching the walls or the floor, knowing that every surface is coated in centuries of grime and bacteria. The food served in the capona is cheap, suspect, and often the source of more illness. You watch the cook, a greasy, unkempt man, preparing barley gruel over an open fire, swatting at flies that land on the ingredients. The wine is almost certainly watered down or mixed with unpleasant additives to disguise its sour taste. You choose to stick to your own meager, safe rations, unwilling to trust your compromised digestive system to the inn's dubious cuisine. Even the architecture seems designed to cause anxiety. The upper gallery where you lie is rickety, the wooden beams groaning under the weight of the occupants. You wonder if this structure, like the insulae in the slums, is one strong wind or one drunken stumble away from total collapse. The sense of stability and safety is an illusion. You are simply exchanging the exposure of the roadside for the compressed dangers of a shared, volatile human space. As the night wears on, you manage to drift into a shallow, fitful doze, constantly interrupted by a shout, a cough, or the unsettling sensation of vermin crawling over your skin. The only thing separating you from total despair is the knowledge that this stop is temporary. Yet, even as you seek oblivion, the sounds of the outside world penetrate the thick walls. The distant, rhythmic voice of an orator, amplified by the night air, suddenly cuts through the inn's internal chaos. You recognize the familiar, passionate cadence. Paul is either preaching or debating nearby, engaging the city's philosophical and religious elite. This sudden reminder that the source of your journey's meaning is also the greatest source of external threat, the incitement of public fury, yanks you fully awake, replacing the fear of rats and robbers with the terror of a unified, angry mob. The distant but unmistakable sound of Paul's passionate voice, coupled with a rising murmur of public disagreement, immediately shifts your fear from the intimate internal threats of the Capona to the vast anonymous danger of the Roman mob. The history of Paul's ministry is punctuated by riots and civil disturbances in Thessalonica, in Jerusalem, and most famously in Ephesus, where the worship of Dionysus Artemis reigned supreme. You know that Paul's message of a singular, resurrected God is not merely a different opinion. It is an existential threat to the powerful, entrenched cults and the commerce that relies upon them. The murmur quickly swells into a full-throated roar. The shouting is frantic, chaotic, and terrifyingly unified. The inn, previously a scene of drunken torpor, instantly empties as its occupants rush out to see the source of the commotion. You and the other companions follow Paul's instructions, remaining hidden, but the urge to see the danger that threatens to consume you is overwhelming. You peer out the doorway, your heart pounding a frantic rhythm against your ribs. The street is choked with people, a tightly packed mass of angry, shouting faces driven by a mix of genuine religious fervor, economic fear, and simple, contagious mob psychology. This is the spontaneous combustion of ancient political life, a crowd suddenly becoming a single, irrational beast driven by collective rage. You can hear the shouts in Greek, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians," or perhaps, "They are upsetting our customs." The specific grievance doesn't matter. The anger is directed at your small, vulnerable group. The terrifying power of the mob lies in its anonymity and its swift, terrifying escalation. The people are not arguing. They are seeking immediate, violent retribution. You hear the sickening crack of objects being thrown, stones, pieces of broken pottery, or chunks of wood ripped from market stalls. The sound is sharp and definite, a clear marker that the confrontation has passed from mere shouting to physical violence. You imagine the blind impact of a stone to the head, the sudden, final oblivion that comes from being crushed beneath the feet of a panicked crowd. You realize with a chilling clarity that the mob does not distinguish between Paul, the instigator, and you, the quiet follower. You are all one object of hate, a single entity to be expelled or destroyed. If you are caught, you will not receive a trial. The law is meaningless when faced with hundreds of enraged citizens. You would be dragged, beaten, possibly stripped, and subjected to the kind of brutal, summary justice that Roman authorities would often tacitly allow, seeing the mob as a self-correcting mechanism for social order. Paul, ever the lightning rod, is often the target, but the chaos puts everyone at risk. You watch as a small group of local Jewish leaders, or perhaps a few sympathetic Roman officials, attempt to intervene, trying to reason with the crowd, but their words are drowned out by the fury. Reason, logic, and law have departed the scene, replaced by the primitive, crushing will of the masses. The air thickens with the smell of sweat, fear, and the dust kicked up by the trampling feet. The sheer noise is physically painful, a continuous, high-pitched scream of rage and excitement. You retreat further into the shadows of the Copona, your body trembling, trying to make yourself as small as possible. Anticipating the moment, the mob turns its attention from Paul to the few known hiding places of his followers. The key to survival now is patience and luck. You must wait for the mob's frenzy to burn itself out, or for the official Roman guard to finally mobilize and suppress the uprising. But waiting means sitting in the suffocating tension, every minute stretching into an hour, knowing that the wrong person, a disgruntled innkeeper or a zealous cult follower, could reveal your location for a few coins. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, the shouts begin to recede, replaced by the sounds of the Roman garrison arriving, the rhythmic tramp of boots, the clash of metal, and the sharp, official commands of the centurions. The mob, fearing the disciplined wrath of the Roman army more than they desired vengeance, reluctantly disperses. Paul, bruised but miraculously safe, reappears. The decision is immediate and non-negotiable. You must flee the city before the local magistrates or the temple authorities can formalize the charges and issue warrants. The risk is too great to stay, even for one more hour. You quickly gather the few items you still possess, leaving the squalor of the inn behind. You must rely on a network of vague instructions, whispered contacts, and local rumors to guide your flight, highlighting the profound insecurity of ancient travel. You are running not toward a clear destination, but away from certain violence, plunging you into the fear of taking a wrong turn. A journey without a map, where every direction is fraught with risk. You have fled the city of Ephesus or Corinth under the cover of the early morning, the adrenaline from the riots still sharp and bitter in your throat. Now, you are once again on the road, but the circumstances are far more precarious than before. You are not simply traveling, you are fleeing, and the primary obstacle is the profound lack of reliable navigation in the ancient world. You are, in effect, driving blind, guided by a patchwork of vague instructions and fleeting memory. The concept of a detailed, accurate map for personal travel is a luxury that barely exists. The maps that do exist, the Roman tabulae, are stylized military and administrative documents, showing major roads and cities, but offering little detail about the actual winding paths, elevation changes, or local features essential for navigation. You rely entirely on the vagaries of human memory and local knowledge. Your directions are cobbled together from hurried whispers with a local contact. Follow the old cistern road for 3 hours. Then, when you see the 3 cypress trees that look like a tripod, turn left at the shrine of the goddess, and you will hit the coast road toward Smyrna. Every piece of information is open to misinterpretation. Which cistern? How fast is 3 hours of walking? And what happens if the shrine has recently been destroyed or overgrown? The lack of a definitive locus, a fixed, verifiable point, turns every instruction into a terrifying guessing game. The fear of taking a wrong turn is immense and immediate. A simple error, misjudging a fork in the road, confusing one shrine for another, could add a full day, or even 2, to your journey. In your current, impoverished state, carrying meager rations, and with your money nearly depleted, adding 2 extra days to the march is catastrophic. It means running out of food and water in a remote, hostile area, forcing you to beg or steal. actions that only invite further Roman scrutiny. You are constantly stopping, checking your bearings against the position of the sun, and arguing quietly with your companions about the meaning of a local landmark. You stop a passing farmer, a gruff man who speaks a deep, impenetrable local dialect, and try to ask for confirmation. He gestures wildly with his hand, pointing in multiple directions, his words an unintelligible torrent. You are forced to interpret his frantic movements, guessing at his meaning, knowing that a misunderstanding here could lead you miles into the unpopulated wilderness. The psychological burden of this navigational uncertainty is crushing. Every time you come to a fork in the road, you face a moment of agonizing doubt. The anxiety is palpable. Is the road less traveled truly the right one? Or is it leading you straight into a bandit encampment or a deadly swamp? You look at Paul, hoping for divine inspiration. But even he, for all his faith, relies on human intelligence and local informants. You begin to recognize the telltale signs of a minor Roman road versus a local sheep track, learning to trust the width, the depth of the wheel ruts, and the presence of distant, poorly maintained milestone markers. But even these markers are often misleading, only confirming your position relative to a distant, irrelevant city, not the immediate path to safety. The uncertainty bleeds into your sleep and your waking hours. You are never truly comfortable that you are heading in the right direction. Every rising sun brings a renewed need for a complex, risky decision about which way to turn. The wasted effort and the sheer anxiety drain your physical reserves just as surely as the rough road itself. As the sun begins to climb high in the sky, threatening another day of debilitating heat, Paul makes an abrupt, calculated decision. Given the lost time fleeing the city and the risk of running out of supplies on the standard route, he declares that you must take a more perilous, but significantly shorter, mountain road shortcut. The local guide warned against it, speaking of difficult terrain, narrow passes, and unpredictable weather. But the necessity of the moment outweighs the risk. You turn away from the well-worn coastal path and begin the arduous ascent into the craggy, silent slopes. You have left the dangers of the road and the sea for a new, unforgiving environment. One where the only threats are gravity, exposure, and the sudden, treacherous malice of the high peaks. The ascent begins, and the familiar misery of the Roman road is instantly replaced by a new, more elemental terror. You have traded the predictable heat of the coastal route for the treacherous, silent malice of the high mountain passes. This shortcut, chosen out of desperation to escape the law, immediately exacts a grueling physical and psychological toll. The path is no longer a Roman engineering feat. It is a rough, winding goat track, little more than loose scree and broken stone barely clinging to the sheer cliff face. The immediate threat is gravity. The path is narrow, sometimes barely wider than your 2 feet, with a terrifying, dizzying drop-off just inches from the edge. One misstep, one lapse in concentration, or one sudden slide of loose rock, and the journey ends with a silent, fatal fall into the chasms below. You move with a sickening, slow deliberation, placing each foot carefully, your eyes glued to the immediate ground, unable to look out at the terrifying, panoramic view of the drop. The height gives you vertigo, a profound physical disorientation that makes the entire world feel unstable. The terrain itself is actively hostile. Falling rocks are a constant, immediate danger. The sudden, sharp rattle of a stone dislodged by a mountain goat or by your own clumsy footwork sends a jolt of panic through you. A rock the size of a fist, gaining speed down the steep slope, could instantly shatter a limb or crush your skull. You are vulnerable to the movements of the mountain itself, which sheds its skin of stone without warning or care for the small human insects crawling across its face. As you climb higher, the environmental conditions shift rapidly and brutally. The midday sun may beat down fiercely, reflecting off the bare rock and causing painful sunburn and dehydration. But the shadows bring an immediate, bone-chilling cold. The air thins and the temperature drops rapidly, even during the summer months. You are unprepared for this. Your clothes, designed for the hot, dry plains, offer little protection against the wind that howls through the narrow passes. This is the danger of hypothermia, the cold that creeps silently into your core, dulling your mind, slowing your movements, and making you careless. The exact state that will lead you to misstep on a slippery patch of ice or loose gravel. Water, essential for survival, is ironically a threat. Meltwater trickles down the rock faces, turning sections of the path into slick, moss-covered slides. The footing is treacherous, forcing you to use your hands to steady yourself, risking tearing the painful, infected skin of your hands on the jagged edges of the rock. The mountain's height also brings an increased human menace. These remote passes, far from the reach of Rome's immediate law, are the domain of independent, hostile entities. You are now in the territory of hill tribes who view travelers as invaders or worse, organized bandits. Unlike the petty thieves of the city, these brigands are often experienced fighters, highly disciplined, and operate with a deep, territorial knowledge of the terrain. They can watch your approach for miles, choosing the perfect spot for an ambush. A narrow gorge, a sudden turn in the path, or a secluded defile where escape is impossible. The fear of these mountain men is a pervasive dread that replaces the anxiety of the Roman patrol. You scan the high ridges and the shadowy recesses of the rock, searching for the telltale glint of metal or the faint outline of a watcher. These brigands do not merely rob. They kill, or they capture to sell you into the deep bondage of the mines, a fate considered worse than death. The isolation of the mountains means that there will be no witnesses, no justice, and no hope of rescue. After a grueling, silent hour of climbing, you navigate a difficult, rocky pass and pause to catch your breath. Paul, his face etched with strain, points wordlessly ahead. Tucked against a small, jutting rock formation, visible only because the birds and scavengers have not yet reached it, lies a decaying corpse. It is clearly the victim of a recent brutal attack. The body is stripped of clothing and belongings, and the manner of death speaks not of a quick mugging, but of a purposeful, savage violence. This is not a chance death from a fall. It is the deliberate signature of the organized brigand. The horrifying sight confirms your greatest fear. You are not just traversing a dangerous landscape. You are actively being hunted, and your life is only a matter of when, not if, you will meet them. The sight, of the desecrated corpse, a silent, terrible monument to the mountain's human menace, strips away any remaining illusion of safety. This is not the work of a single, desperate robber. The organized bandit is a chilling reality of ancient travel, operating with military precision and a ruthless hierarchy. You realize that your small group is nothing more than potential loot, and your freedom is only guaranteed until you cross the invisible line of their territory. The mountain path, already a physical ordeal, is now a tunnel of terror. The fear of the organized brigand is unique because it is rational and systematic. They do not rely on chance. They rely on intelligence, patience, and superior planning. They know the difficult terrain, the limited escape routes, and the desperate state of mind of their prey. They use decoys, set traps with ropes and snares, and always attack at a point where the traveler is most vulnerable, usually a difficult ascent, a blind curve, or a narrow, inescapable gorge. Your pace slows to a crawl, driven not by exhaustion, but by an acute, hypervigilant paranoia. Every large rock becomes a potential hiding place, every cluster of scrub a possible concealment. You find yourself scanning the tops of the ridges, looking for the telltale flash of light on a weapon or the subtle movement of a sentry. The psychological strain of being constantly watched, of knowing that the attack could come from any direction without warning, is almost as debilitating as the physical climb. You try to move silently, but the loose scree betrays your position with every step. The sound of falling rock announcing your presence to the whole vast empty landscape. Paul urges caution, relying on prayer and an almost defiant lack of fear. But you are unable to emulate his calm. The image of the dead traveler is burned into your mind, a reminder of the brutality that awaits capture. The tactics of the ambush, recounted in hushed tales by terrified travelers, are horrifying. It begins with a sudden barrage of arrows or thrown stones, designed to sow chaos and injure the leader. Then, the brigands descend, often yelling to amplify their numbers and their terrifying presence. The violence is immediate and overwhelming. They do not waste time on negotiation. They are looking for money, weapons, and young, healthy bodies to sell into slavery. The brutal, cold efficiency of their violence is what truly terrifies you. Being captured means not just robbery, but a calculated, systematic process of extraction. They will strip you, search every hidden seam of your clothing, and even check your mouth for hidden coins. If they believe you are holding back, torture is immediate and common. They might use fire, sharp stones, or simply the agonizing pressure of their hands to force compliance. For Paul, the known preacher, the interrogation would be even worse, as they might seek to humiliate him or extract a confession of his supposed sorcery before killing him. The thought of being sold into slavery by these men is a dark, final horror. You would be taken to a remote, unofficial market, traded for a few coins, and then forced into the worst labor. The unforgiving darkness of the Roman mines, where life expectancy is measured in months, or the grinding despair of a rural farm, where escape is nearly impossible. Your mind, already exhausted, keeps replaying the silent, open-mouthed terror on the face of the dead man you saw minutes ago. Just as the fear reaches its peak, As you round a precarious bend in the cliff path, a sudden distraction interrupts the terrifying silence. At the entrance to a small, hidden cave, you come across a small, huddled group of mountain locals. They are not bandits, but simple, desperate shepherds, gathered around a severely afflicted man, a boy, perhaps, writhing in pain from a violent, unexplained seizure or fever. Paul, seeing the suffering, immediately approaches. He does not hesitate to place his hands on the boy, speaking a quiet prayer over the hysterical cries of the shepherds. In a moment that defies the laws of the harsh mountain world, the boy's convulsions cease. His eyes clear, and he sinks into a peaceful, deep slumber. It is a profound, undeniable healing miracle. The sheer power of the event should bring peace, but instead, it sends a fresh wave of panic through you. The shepherds fall to their knees, worshiping Paul with a mix of awe and terror. This miracle, so clear and powerful, is not a moment of quiet grace. It is an undeniable public spectacle. It attracts the wrong kind of attention. The news of a traveling man who commands the powers of healing will travel faster than any horse, alerting not just the devout, but the skeptical and the jealous. It will inevitably reach the ears of the local Roman authorities, who see such displays not as acts of kindness, but as illegal sorcery, a challenge to their political and religious authority. The healing is a beacon that spells imminent danger. The immediate, visceral awe of the healing miracle quickly dissipates, replaced by the chilling, pragmatic realization that Paul's spiritual power has just placed a massive, invisible target on the backs of your entire group. In the eyes of the terrified shepherds, Paul is a divine man. In the eyes of Rome, he is a sorcerer, a public disturbance, and a direct threat to the established religious and political order. Roman law is profoundly suspicious of foreign, unauthorized spiritual activity. The empire permits a wide variety of cults and local gods, but it aggressively persecutes anything that promises to disrupt the social hierarchy or challenge the official state religion, the worship of the emperor, and the Roman pantheon. Paul's miracle, a public display of power outside the recognized temples, falls squarely into the dangerous category of maleficia, illegal sorcery, or witchcraft. The consequences of this interpretation are swift and unforgiving. The local Roman magistrate, or even a zealous town leader, will not investigate the theological claims of the miracle. They will simply see a foreign Jew attracting a crowd and demonstrating an unauthorized power, which is inherently subversive. The official process, known as coercitio, is immediate and brutal. There is no need for a lengthy trial. The local authority has the power to inflict summary punishment, including flogging, imprisonment, or even execution, simply for disturbing the peace. You realize that this miracle is more dangerous than the storm or the bandit. The bandit wants your money. The Roman official wants your compliance and the maintenance of his authority. By healing the boy, Paul has claimed a spiritual territory that Rome reserves only for its official gods and its emperor. This act of kindness is, in effect, an act of political treason. The speed with which the news travels is alarming. The shepherds, driven by fear and adoration, will rush down the mountain to spread the word, exaggerating the event with every step. Within hours, the tale of the foreign miracle worker will reach the nearest Roman outpost, where it will be viewed with suspicion and hostility. The authorities will assume Paul is part of a dangerous, secret society or a rebel group using false spiritual claims to destabilize the region. Your group quickly moves away from the cave, forcing yourselves to ignore the agonizing protests of your feet. You are racing against rumor, attempting to put distance between the miracle and the inevitable official response. The psychological pressure of this pursuit is enormous. You no longer fear a random encounter. You fear a methodical, disciplined hunt by Roman soldiers who have been explicitly ordered to find and neutralize you. You discuss in hushed, fearful tones the possibility of Paul being accused of superstitio, an unauthorized foreign religion, or worse, maestas, treason against the state. The penalties for these are severe, often involving hard labor, exile, or death by crucifixion. The whip marks Paul already bears from previous beatings in various cities attest to the Roman impatience with his message. This time, the charges will be higher, fueled by superstition and official fear. The tension becomes unbearable when you hear a distant but distinct sound. The sharp, clear call of a Roman trumpet echoing up the mountain valley. They are mobilizing. They are on your trail. They know your general direction, and thanks to the shepherds, they know what you look like. They are not looking for a vagrant. They are looking for a man who openly defies their gods and their laws. Paul urges you forward, his face grim but resolute. He knows the cost of his calling, and he accepts it. But for you, the follower, the terror is complete. You are caught between your own yearning for safety and the gravitational pull of Paul's dangerous, world-changing mission. The trumpet call draws closer, cutting through the thin mountain air with chilling clarity. You have no time to hide, no time to reason, and no time to plead. As you scramble over a final ridge, you are suddenly met not by open road, but by the solid, unmoving line of a Roman detachment. Swords are drawn, the leather armor creaks, and the officer's voice is sharp and devoid of mercy. In the name of the emperor, you are under arrest. You are seized, bound with rough rope that bites into your skin, and dragged down the mountain. The dignity and purpose of your journey are instantly stripped away, replaced by the crushing weight of Roman coercitio. You are hauled toward the one place every traveler in the ancient world dreads most: the public jail, the carcer, a damp, dark hole designed not to rehabilitate, but to break the spirit before the final punishment. The Roman jail, the carcer, is not the neatly structured courthouse of a modern mind. It is a hole in the ground, a place of filth and profound darkness, designed less as a holding cell and more as a sensory deprivation chamber meant to extinguish hope. You are thrust down into this public prison, the rough stone steps slick with centuries of accumulated grime, sewage, and unnameable filth. The iron door clangs shut with a heavy finality that echoes the ceiling of a tomb. The darkness is absolute and oppressive. It is a tangible thing that presses against your eyes, forcing your other senses to take over with horrifying results. The air is thick and stagnant, heavy with the stench of unwashed bodies, stale excrement, rancid oil from the single, sputtering lamp far down the hall, and the powerful, musky odor of damp, decaying stone. Every breath is a violation. The floor is cold, wet stone, coated in slime. You dare not sit, much less lie down, knowing that this dampness is a breeding ground for every disease known to the ancient world. The lack of sanitation is the worst torment. The only latrine is a bucket in the corner, shared by dozens of desperate men, which is rarely, if ever, emptied. The constant humidity, combined with the human waste, turns the cell into a perfect incubator for deadly fevers. The living conditions are unbearable. You are packed shoulder to shoulder with the city's most desperate elements: thieves, murderers, debtors, and other foreign preachers caught in the same unforgiving net. They are hungry, dangerous, and demoralized. You clutch your tunic tightly, terrified of the pickpockets and the possibility of a sudden, violent confrontation in the suffocating blackness. Sleep is utterly impossible. The darkness is also a haven for the vermin. The wet stone walls and floors are alive with rats and mice, bold and numerous, drawn by the filth and the promise of human scraps. You can hear their tiny claws scratching in the corners, and occasionally you feel the unsettling brush of their bodies against your feet. They are not just pests, they are carriers of bubonic plague and other deadly diseases, making every moment spent in the carcer a direct challenge to your survival. The psychological trauma is immense. You are subject to the constant arbitrary brutality of the guards, men who are bored, underpaid, and fueled by wine and contempt for their prisoners. They often unleash their frustration through random, unprovoked beatings or simple neglect, denying water or food for days on end. The crushing psychological reality is that your fate is entirely dependent on the whim of these men, and the whim of a magistrate who will decide your punishment only after he has finished his dinner. The continuous hunger is a dull, painful ache in your gut. Food, when provided, is a meager, filthy ration, a handful of coarse barley or a crust of stale bread, just enough to prolong the misery, but not enough to sustain your strength. This systematic starvation further weakens your immune system, making you an easier target for the endemic fevers. Paul, despite the horrific conditions, maintains a terrifying, unnatural calm. He speaks in low, steady tones, praying and attempting to offer comfort to the terrified prisoners. This spiritual defiance, while inspiring, seems recklessly dangerous in a place designed to crush the spirit. You huddle in the corner, shivering from the damp and the fear, the weight of the rough rope still digging into your raw wrists, resigning yourself to the grim reality that this might be the end of the road. Suddenly, the silent, oppressive darkness is broken by an impossible sound, a violent, shuddering crack that is not thunder, but the sound of the prison itself protesting. The ground beneath your feet trembles, the stone walls groan, and the heavy iron doors burst violently open. A strange, blinding light, a powerful, unnatural luminescence fills the entire dungeon, driving the darkness back into the corners. It is an undeniable, terrifying miracle. Paul, his face radiating an otherworldly serenity, is instantly freed from his bonds. The escape is chaotic and silent. The guards are frozen in shock and fear, unable to move or speak. You follow Paul, scrambling up the slick stone stairs, bursting back out into the night air. But the relief is fleeting. This miraculous escape is not an ending. It is a catalyst. It confirms every Roman fear of Paul as a powerful, dangerous sorcerer, and places a massive, undeniable bounty on both your heads. You are now fugitives from Roman justice, forcing you to adopt a new, desperate level of stealth and paranoia as you flee the city under the cover of the turbulent, fear-filled night. The immediate rush of air and the sudden, unnatural light of the miracle fades as you scramble away from the prison, replaced by the deep, paralyzing darkness of the Roman night. You are no longer merely travelers. You are fugitives. The clanging door of the carcer, followed by the inevitable shouts of the aroused and terrified guards, signals a complete shift in your reality. You are now the target of the state, and the bounty placed on Paul's head, and yours by association, is massive, guaranteeing that every poor, greedy, or zealous citizen will be looking for you. The first terrifying realization is that the main roads are now fatal. The efficient Roman system, which previously aided your journey, is now perfectly designed to capture you. Every bridge, every city, gate, and every toll station will be watched. You cannot afford to walk on the paved, well-maintained surface of the Via Egnatia. You must flee through the rough, trackless country, often stumbling through olive groves, across dry riverbeds, and over unforgiving, rocky fields. This choice dramatically increases your physical toil, slows your pace to a crawl, and constantly risks further injury to your already infected feet. Stealth becomes your new, consuming profession. You move only in the deepest part of the night, when the moon is hidden or the general population is asleep. You speak only in whispers, terrified that a simple cough or the rustle of your tunic will give away your position to a passing farmer or a nervous watchman. Your senses, already frayed by constant exposure, are now on agonizing high alert, straining to distinguish the sound of a harmless owl from the approach of a Roman patrol. To hide your identities, you must discard any remaining possessions that might mark you as a foreigner or a missionary. Paul quickly gets rid of anything that hints at his Roman citizenship, a final, painful surrender of his only legal shield. You must look like vagrants, local field workers, or simple, nondescript shadows. This need to remain invisible eliminates all access to honest labor or trade, forcing you into a life of near starvation, relying solely on the most meager scraps. Your survival now depends entirely on a secret, tenuous network of sympathizers, the small, hidden cells of believers Paul has established in the region. These sympathizers, often poor, frightened citizens, risk everything by offering you brief, temporary sanctuary. You are smuggled into crowded, hidden rooms, concealed under floorboards, or hidden in the back storage areas of small shops. The safety these havens offer is psychological, not absolute. You cannot stay in one place for more than a single night, as the risk of exposure is too high. Each dawn means a nervous, hurried flight to the next temporary refuge, relying on vague, coded instructions given by nervous hosts. You find yourselves eating cold, tasteless food in silence, constantly listening for the sound of knocking or the heavy tramp of Roman boots outside. The food is appreciated, but the fear of bringing ruin upon your benefactors poisons every mouthful. The collapse of comfort is complete. There is no more talk of comfortable inns, however squalid. There is no more walking on the civilized roads. There is no more rest that is not haunted by the immediate fear of betrayal. Every human face you see on the periphery of your hiding place is a potential danger, a person who could claim the bounty and end your journey. Paranoia is no longer a psychological weakness. It is a necessary, life-preserving instinct. This desperate, subterranean existence continues for days, perhaps weeks, until you finally reach the outskirts of the next major city, a vast imperial metropolis that Paul identifies as your next base of operation. The size and sheer volume of people here, while terrifying, paradoxically offer the best chance for anonymity. You realize that while a small town would recognize and report you instantly, the vast, churning chaos of the city might allow you to get lost in the noise. However, as you prepare to enter the gates, the overwhelming scale of the urban center replaces the primal fear of the chase with the complex, multi-layered dangers unique to a Roman megalopolis. Stepping into the vast, suffocating sprawl of the imperial metropolis, a city like Rome itself, or perhaps the overwhelming scale of Alexandria or Antioch, is like leaving the natural world for a dangerous, teeming jungle made of stone and humanity. The anonymity that first promised safety quickly becomes another source of overwhelming fear, as the sheer density of the population turns the city itself into an active, constant threat. The initial shock is the noise and the overwhelming traffic. The streets are narrow, and Roman urban planning prioritized commerce over pedestrian safety. You find yourself navigating a constant, terrifying flow of heavy carts, sedan chairs carried by running slaves, mule trains, and hundreds of shouting, aggressively competitive merchants. The risk of being crushed, trampled, or run over by the immense, ironclad wheels of a heavy transport cart is immediate and persistent. The noise level is deafening, a cacophony of shouting, iron scraping against stone, and the lowing of animals, which completely overwhelms your ability to communicate or concentrate. The city's architecture is itself a death trap. The apartment blocks, or insulae, are tightly packed, poorly constructed wooden structures that soar precariously high, reaching 3, 4, and even 5 stories. The proximity of these dry, brittle buildings means that the risk of fire is constant and horrifying. A single, overturned oil lamp or a carelessly tended cooking fire can, in minutes, turn a block into a raging inferno. You constantly glance upward, terrified of the instability, knowing that escape from the packed lower streets is impossible once the flames take hold. The memory of the clean mountain air is replaced by the suffocating smell of smoke and human waste. The social climate is predatory. The density of the city breeds aggressive beggary and casual criminality. You are constantly accosted by desperate, scarred men demanding alms, their hands reaching out to grab your cloak or your pack. The vast anonymity of the city means that petty theft is rampant. A quick, practiced slice of a knife through a purse or a sudden distraction can leave you stripped of everything you possess, including the small, necessary tools of Paul's trade. Unlike the brigand who kills for gain, the city thief preys on the vulnerable simply because he can, trusting the masses to provide cover for his escape. This pervasive anonymity, the very thing you sought for refuge, makes you an easy target. If you cry out, no one will help. They are too busy, too indifferent, or too afraid of getting involved. You are a nameless face in a tide of thousands. And if you are assaulted or dragged into an alley, your disappearance will not even register on the city's vast, indifferent consciousness. You walk with your shoulders hunched, trying to make yourself small, keeping your eyes down, desperately trying to avoid any direct contact that might lead to an unwanted exchange. Even your attempts to buy food are stressful. The city vendors are quick-witted and mercilessly exploit the ignorance of foreign newcomers, selling spoiled goods at exorbitant prices. Paul, however, begins to navigate this chaos with a newfound, practiced patience. He finds a small community of Jewish tent makers, his own trade, tucked away in a crowded, less fashionable quarter of the city. He secures a place not just to stay, but to work, seeking to blend into the city's vast working population. This means the immediate, acute dangers of the chase and the riot have passed, but you are now committed to a new, long-term environmental horror: the unceasing, high-stress atmosphere of the workshop. You have exchanged the peril of the open road for the debilitating, slow-motion destruction of repetitive, exhausting indoor labor. The tent maker's workshop, a small, dark room shared with Paul and a few others, offers a deceptive sanctuary. It is dry, it is relatively safe from the street's immediate dangers, and it provides the necessary income to survive. But the labor itself quickly becomes an insidious, debilitating torment, another chapter in the journey's systematic destruction of your body. This is the grind, Paul's profession, a monotonous, physically ruinous existence driven by the constant need to feed yourselves and fund the mission. The environment of the workshop is brutal. It is perpetually noisy, filled with the rhythmic, deafening thwack of the mallet against leather and the rasping sound of coarse animal hide being dragged across the stone floor. The air is thick with the fine, irritating dust of dried animal skin, wool, and linen fibers, which you breathe in with every shallow inhalation. This dust settles in your lungs, contributing to a constant wheezing cough that refuses to clear, a silent internal reminder of the occupational hazards of the trade. The nature of the work is physically corrosive. Tent making requires immense, focused labor, often involving the stitching and cutting of heavy, stiff animal hides, usually goat hair or thick leather, used for tents, tarpaulins, and awnings. You sit hunched over a low bench for 14, sometimes 16 hours a day, working by the dim, flickering light of a cheap oil lamp. The physical posture is crippling. You are forced to lean forward, straining to pull the thick, waxed cord through the tough material, creating a constant, aching tension in your neck and shoulders. The chronic back pain begins subtly, then flares into a continuous, dull agony that no amount of rest can truly alleviate. Your spine protests this daily abuse, cementing the physical damage inflicted by the road and the carcer. The strain on your hands is immense. The stitching requires thick, sharp awls and needles to pierce the hides. Cuts and punctures are inevitable. And in this unsanitary environment, every minor nick is a potential entry point for infection. The friction from pulling the heavy, waxed thread leaves raw, burning grooves in your fingers. Your hands, once capable, are now constantly stiff, swollen, and riddled with minor, painful injuries that never fully heal. Worst of all is the damage to your eyes. Working by the dim, smoky lamplight, squinting to thread the needle and follow the stitch line on the dark, coarse material puts an impossible strain on your vision. Your eyes burn, water, and refuse to focus clearly. The constant effort leads to blinding headaches that pound against your skull, further eroding your concentration and your already compromised state of mind. You realize with a growing dread that this labor, while saving your life financially, is slowly and systematically rendering your body useless for future journeys. Paul, despite his age and the marks of his previous sufferings, works with the same unyielding focus he applies to his preaching. He works the tools with practiced efficiency, but even his movements are stiff and labored. He takes the cuts, the dust, and the pain as a matter of course, a physical discipline necessary for his spiritual mission. He demonstrates a staggering resistance to the physical toll, but you feel your own body breaking under the weight of this new burden. The long, unrelenting hours drain your strength, leaving you too exhausted for proper reflection or even sleep. You leave the bench each night, not refreshed, but profoundly weary, only to return hours later to the same monotonous, physically destructive routine. The high-stress, exhausting toil of the workshop, combined with the accumulated traumas of the sea, the road, and the prison, has pushed your body beyond its capacity for recovery. As you finally set aside the needle and rub your throbbing, aching back, a chilling realization washes over you. Even if you complete the mission, even if you survive the next riot and the next storm, the journey has already ended your former self. You look at your scarred, stiff hands, your wheezing chest, and your perpetually aching joints, and know that this journey has left you permanently marked. The pain is no longer temporary. It is integrated into your bones, a permanent tax levied by the gospel road. The finality of the tent maker's grind offers a moment of chilling clarity. The mission continues. Paul's will remains iron strong, and the word of God still rings out in the forums and synagogues. But for you, the follower, the journey is over in a deeper, more profound sense. You have survived the sea, the brigand, and the carcer, but you have not emerged whole. The accumulated traumas of the gospel road have left permanent, indelible marks, confirming that the cost of this pilgrimage is lifelong physical damage. You begin to catalog the permanent remnants of the journey. The persistent, low-grade ache in your joints, particularly your knees and ankles, is a constant companion. The repetitive, pounding stress of thousands of miles walked on unyielding Roman pavement and rough mountain trails has ruined the cartilage and inflamed the tendons. Every change in weather, every slight drop in temperature sends a deep, throbbing reminder of the abuse your lower body endured. You will walk with a limp and a stiffness for the rest of your life, a permanent badge of the road. The dust of the highways, the smoke of the Kapana fires, and the fine particulate matter from the tent maker's workshop have combined to damage your lungs beyond recovery. The chronic cough that plagued you in the city has evolved into a persistent heavy wheeze. Your breath is perpetually shallow, and even simple exertion now leaves you panting, a permanent vulnerability to respiratory illness that will shorten your remaining years. The encounters with the sea and the prison left their own specialized marks. The continuous roar of the storm, the repeated close proximity to loud shouting, and perhaps the sheer percussive shock of the miraculous prison break have resulted in a measurable loss of hearing. You now often turn your head to catch whispered conversation, or find yourself nodding blankly during Paul's discourses. This is the permanent silence left by the gods of the storm, making it harder to hear the very gospel you risked your life to follow. Internally, the damage is subtle but corrosive. The constant consumption of tainted water, spoiled food, and the stress-induced starvation periods have permanently compromised your digestive system. Chronic digestive unrest, characterized by pain, nausea, and unpredictable illness, is now your daily lot. Your body's ability to draw strength and sustenance from food has been fundamentally broken by the ancient world's poor hygiene. Even your eyesight, strained by the fine work of the tent maker's bench and the relentless sun of the plains, has diminished. You struggle to read the small script of the letters Paul dictates, and the world is now viewed through a perpetual, hazy film. As you look at your reflection in a basin of water, a gaunt face, eyes ringed with perpetual exhaustion, and a faint, residual scar where the abscess once threatened to turn to gangrene, you realize the truth. The person who began this journey, naive, relatively healthy, and full of abstract conviction, died somewhere on the Via Ignatia, perished on the cliff path, or suffocated in the dank air of the carcer. The one who remains is a new creation, a hardened shell, permanently scarred, physically compromised, but possessing an unbreakable, earned knowledge. The cost of the gospel road was not martyrdom, but the permanent sacrifice of your former self. You are now defined entirely by the wounds and the limits imposed by your survival. You are the living testament to the physical price of carrying the message of faith across the unforgiving, brutal reality of the Roman Empire. You endured, you survived, and though your body is now a map of suffering, your spirit remains tethered to the iron will of the man who led you. The journey is concluded, but the consequences, the chronic pain, the wheezing breath, the deafness, will endure until your final day.